Can the spirit die? The text of this video has been translated by Google Translator. So if something is not clear, understandable, it is for this reason. Thank you for your understanding. The text was taken from the book Elucidations of the Beyond. It is a book of spiritual content. It was dictated by Ramatís and psychographed by the medium Hercílio Maes. The book was published in 1964. Can the spirit die? Question: can you tell us something about a thesis already given to the publicity concerning the death or disintegration of the spirit deliberated by God before the contingency or hypothesis of the eternal rebellion of a son? Reply from Ramatís: to admit the death of the spirit, that is, of the soul, and to spread or bring this conception to the canvas of publicity is to create another maze of theological doubts and to increase the controversy existing between the diverse beliefs or religions that are already found in uncompromising disagreements as to the interpretation of the letter of the Gospels. Let us consider the case, in the face of the omniscient, immutable and absolute vision of the wisdom of God. It is inadmissible the perennial rebellion of the creature against its creator and its laws. Such a presumption and its punitive consequences are those of the biblical formula of fallen angels. However, such a dogma, like others, has no moral consistency of logic and common sense, nor even to be admitted under a merely theoretical reasoning, since the death of the spirit is a concrete impossibility. The disintegration of the consciences individuals born of the bosom of God would constitute a great aberration, since the extinction or death of the living sparks that the Creator has cast from himself would imply the death of himself, which is the source of that life. As it will be on the day when the rays of light of the Sun King are extinguished or died, for being living fractions of himself, it is obvious that he will also die. Let us then approach the other angle of the theorem, what refers to evil, its causes, its effects and amplitude. Evil is a reaction of moral depressions, however, transient, without prejudice that subsists in eternity. Man, in his evolutionary journey, while remaining in the ignorance of his eternal spiritual reality, his disorderly free will leads him to commit follies of every kind, that is, he practices evil. It is that his ears are still closed to the deep voice that vibrates in the recess of his conscience, warning him to resist the negative impulses of evil, for his own benefit, for God does not want the death of the wicked, but that he regenerate and be saved. In the intermediate phases of its evolution, man, activated by the negative but persistent force of egoism, has as his supreme ideal of his life to acquire resources without limit, that guarantee him to provide not only to his common needs, but also to enable him to enjoy the enjoyment of superfluous pleasures and comforts. However, as soon as he is aware that he is an immortal spirit and feels within himself the sublime grandeur of this attribute, and yet that the eternity factor will eventually overcome it, smashing all the resistances of his rebellion against the good, pay it, then, little by little, renouncing the pleasures and ephemeral interests of the utilitarian world that surrounds it. In this recuperative stage, which is prolonged by various reincarnations, the day arrives when a new dawn opens to illuminate his conscience, and then there is the transfiguration referred to by Paul of Tarsus. The old man made of animal flesh gives place to the new man of spiritual reality. Then the dynamics of his selfishness, which is the nature of the lower ego, gradually becomes sublimated, transmutes into a factor or energetic element of the higher ego. That is, the newly awakened new man is ready to assume the command of himself, in his transit through the cosmos. And as his consciousness rises and sanctifies, then, that same firmness of will is power that overcomes and realizes, Instead of being in the service of the lower ego, it begins to serve the higher self, whose supreme ideal is the love fraternity of cosmic amplitude, which, in the integral realization of love of God above all things and neighbor as himself, forgives, sacrifices, succeeds, renounces, giving all without thinking of itself. And so, attain this moral fullness of sanctifying degree, the human microcosm, which is man, begins to reflect the qualities, the sublime virtues of the divine macrocosm, which is God. Then the affirmation of Genesis is made, which says, man is made in the image of God, and also, according to Jesus, the Son and the Father are one. Let us now consider the moral essence of his presumption as to the possibility of a spirit remaining in the abysses of sin through time eternity. Such a contingency is inadmissible in all respects, for there is a cosmic law of dynamic evolution, which imposes an upward movement on all phenomena of the universe, propelling the imperfect to the most perfect, the worst to rise to the best. And even gross matter itself, in its atomic and molecular constitution, is subject to this evolutionary imperative. In addition to the above reasons, the theory of the death of the spirit is shattered by the base, in view of the following moral contingencies, since God, by virtue of his attributes of foreknowledge and omniscience, sees and identifies the future as a present reality, it is obvious that he knows in advance what direction or moral direction each of his children will follow in their planetary lives. And as a result of this anticipated vision, he would know, therefore, that among them some, by the effect of their free will, will become incorrigible rebels, and that he will then have to extinguish them by means of the spiritual death penalty. Now, in the face of such contingency or determinism, the following moral conflict would arise in relation to the divine attributes. For among the spirits, the children of God, some possessing virtue or willpower that would make them capable of attaining the hierarchy of angelship and living up to eternal life, and others conditioned to be a kind of devil, and that, later on, it will be necessary to extinguish them by spiritual death. Then, how to reconcile this wicked bias of the Creator himself, in the face of his attributes of infinite justice and love? Amend or correct today one's act of yesterday, then, which is made of its perfection and infallibility.
Ramatís.